A bonkers huge episode of Bizarre Yet Bonafide this week with tons of stuff to dig into. First off, we get closure on the body in the woods story. Apparently the teen made it all up in the hopes of scaring his girlfriend enough to keep her from going to the Hackett's Quarry camp for the summer. Which, probably for the best, given the events of the game. This leads to some understandable bitterness on Grace's part and kills my theory that the kid saw Eliza. Luckily, we'll get more clues about Eliza going forward. The disappeared Anne Radcliffe story gets an update, although Benson is not mentioned this time. Anton asks for some proof that the missing hiker was even in the area. Grace doesn't have any, but we do. This missing persons poster, which was uploaded to the Quarry's Instagram page. As you can see, the official police position is that she was driving in the hiking trails around Hackett's Quarry when she mysteriously disappeared. This, naturally, raises a pretty big question. What exactly happened to her car? After all, if you're murdering hikers and don't want people to know they were last seen on or near your property, you've got to do something about the car that they drove to the woods in, right? And that's where it becomes super convenient that there's a scrapyard so close to the summer camp that it's on the camp's map. Have the Killbillies been helping cover up the monster's crimes along with Travis? Next we get another Peanut Butter Pops reference. I'm still not entirely clear what these are. A cereal, probably. And it seems they were discontinued years ago, making it a childhood reference for the characters. Is any of this meaningful? Probably not. Then we get a nod to the famous White Lady ghost story. The idea that wronged women will return as ghostly apparitions, bent on avenging themselves for the sins committing against them in the past. This makes Eliza's "choice taken from me" line especially meaningful. Obviously something terrible happened to her in the past. Does she want revenge for it? And will that revenge factor into the game's plot? They even mention the association between the white woman folklore and the idea of a mysterious hitchhiker. This is the popular story where a woman is picked up in the middle of nowhere, seems to have a tragic reason why she was left on the side of the road, and then either gets dropped off somewhere strange or mysteriously disappears from the front seat of the car. Then the next day, the driver discovers that the woman they saw died some years ago, out on that stretch of road, and has been haunting drivers ever since. While this doesn't exactly map to Eliza as depicted in The Quarry, she certainly does hitch a ride with Lauren Max during the accident. And if Abigail's slice of life is anything to go by, we can expect to see a bunch more of Eliza's ghostly form lurking around the camp after night falls. Then we get a truly disturbing story from Grace about a woman whose husband went off to fight in what was presumably the Civil War. But he was so paranoid that she would cheat on him while he was gone that he locked her in the cellar with some small amount of food to eat until he came back. But then he was killed in battle, and since he hadn't told anyone what he had done, and I guess she had no friends, she was left to starve to death in the basement. Only she didn't starve to death. Her hunger drove her to madness, and she began devouring her own flesh and blood, causing her to bleed to death. This act of auto-cannibalism was so monstrous that after her death she continued on as a vengeful spirit, eager to get revenge on just about anyone who crossed her path. While this likely won't be Eliza's backstory, it lacks the fortune-telling, Romani, carnival aspect that's been so crucial to establishing her so far. It brings up the key idea of an angry spirit wanting revenge, and that's something that could well turn up in the main game. Grace suggests that this kind of betrayal and bad death can transform someone into a hag that haunts the area, and that would certainly seem to fit what we know about Eliza so far. We also hear about a woman who drowned herself and appears as a bloated corpse that vomits seawater as it tries to speak, clearly calling out the bloated corpse we've seen in a couple of videos. Will this guy, possibly Benson, be back as a monster bent on revenge like in that Friday the 13th movie? And of course, we can't overlook the connection between cannibalism and the Wendigos who featured so prominently in Until Dawn. While this episode of BYB specifically references the Woman in White legend, as well as the story of the woman who ate herself to death and transformed into a cursed hag, the two images associated with this episode, a gray hand with long claws in its extended fingers, and a gray-skinned bald monster with prominent teeth, both visually suggest the Wendigo design from Until Dawn. Is this an extended reference to that game? Or can we expect to see something truly Wendigo-like somewhere in The Quarry? The episode ends with the biggest tease and cliffhanger yet. Grace is actually going to go out to Hackett's Woods and see if she can find any sign of ghosts. Do we have a big surprise incoming? Will Grace and Anton actually be in the game? This could explain why, if they keep to their scheduling, it looks like the second last episode of BYB is going to come out the day before The Quarry does on June 9th, with the final episode coming out sometime after launch. Is Grace's trip to Hackett Woods going to be referenced in the game somewhere? And the final episode of the podcast will in some way address her trip there and the events of the game? In even a roundabout way? That would be one hell of a tie-in, and vault this podcast to be one of the most interesting promotional podcasts ever. I've been the Hidden Object Guru. Thanks for watching. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, consider checking out our Patreon. You can join heroic patrons like Marissa, Joanne, Eduardo, Brian, and Archer in helping keep the lights on around here. If you'd like to see more, there's nightly streams and plenty of videos to check out. We'll see you back here for the next thing, but until then, au revoir.